Welcome back to the show. Today we have Barbara Spitzer here, and she's the founder and CEO of Two Rivers Partners LLC, which is a consulting firm where she aligns business and workforce strategies in purpose-driven, large-scale transformation. And in her spare time, Barbara travels the world seeking new and exotic places to scuba dive and hone her underwater photography skills. So I have to ask, your underwater photography skills. I saw that sprinkled throughout little stuff I read about you. Do you have a webpage where we could go check out your underwater photography?
I don't, but it's such a good idea if I can only find the time. But no, Facebook, which is private. I gotta think about that.
You should, because I was looking around and I was like, either she doesn't have one or it's under a different name or something that I can't
I'm adding
find.
that
But
to
I
my
said,
to-do list.
yeah, but how fun would that be to even have on your webpage, if you're interested in checking out, because it gives this other angle to you that's what? You scuba dive and take underwater photos? That is so cool.
I'm doing that. Thank you for the suggestion.
You should. I would love to see them at least. All right. So I want to jump right in and talking about your business, right? Especially the Two Rivers Partners, because for our audience, Barbara launched this in 2015, your business. So that was almost 10 years ago. Then you were recruited by Accenture. So you went to work for Accenture, but then you went back to your business after 5 years. What was so appealing about Accenture that you decided to leave your business or just put it on hiatus?
Yes, Kiri, thank you so much. That's such a good question. It's a story. So when I started Two Rivers Partners, I had just left an SVP position at one of the large global consultancies where I ran a large global practice, $150 million P&L, a 250 person team. And it was a really great organization. It was a great experience, but I was burned out. I was surrounded by boys club, and there was just a lot of dynamics that occurred. And so when I decided to leave, I had to recover from what was a very toxic environment for me. So I decided to go out on my own. And I happened to meet the CEO of a nonprofit, the National Organization on Disability. She wanted to hire me. I was not ready to go work full time in a nonprofit, but I offered my services as a consultant. So I advised NOD for 2.5 years. And then I filled in with other projects during that time. So it was great. I needed a break. I needed to refresh. I needed to just really take a step back from the go-go world of large consulting. But then I got this call from a leader at Accenture who I actually competed against in a different firm. And we always stayed in touch. Barbara, I want you to come work here someday. And, we tried several times. It was never the right time for one or the other. But he goes, look, I hired a new leader, Eva Sage Gavin, to run the talent and organization practice, which is my work that I do. You have to meet her. So I met Eva. In walks this beautiful, striking, she looks like Wonder woman wearing this beautiful pink suit with Valentino pink pumps. And I was like, who is she? She's so amazing. And I fell in love with her at first sight. And I also love this other person as well, Jack. I said, yes, I as much as I know going back may very well feel toxic for me. And I'm going back into that world that really left me so depleted back in 2015. I jumped at the chance. First of all, it was a really important wealth creation period in my life. So let me go back into big consulting, try to, put some little money in the bank to fund my future after 60. So I did that. I had a 5-year plan. Now, I ended up leaving about 7 months before my intended departure date. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this today. I was part of me and 799 of my fellow managing directors were part of a layoff in March of 2023. I went 35 and a half years with never being laying off a lot of people. So it happened. And it's like, okay, I got severance. And so I plotted my plan without having to work full time, reopened Two Rivers Partners in July, got 3 clients from the get-go, and here I am.
Oh, wow. So let's go back a little bit to when you were burned out and you're in this toxic environment. why didn't you, when the nonprofit offered you a job, why didn't you take that? Because the setting was different. You could have convinced yourself, like, oh, this is not going to be toxic. This is like, it's a steady paycheck. It's
Yeah.
health insurance. It's all these things that a lot of people look for in having a job and that safety. What made you say to yourself, I'm not ready for that, even though it offers all these benefits?
Yeah. I mean, I go by my gut. I look back at my career. I never had a plan, but I love where I am. And so I just wasn't ready to work in nonprofit. By the way, I'm on 3 nonprofit boards, and I only advise boards now. I'll talk about that in a minute. I love the world of nonprofit, but I just wasn't ready. I think I was just exhausted. And by the way, nonprofits are commercial enterprises. Anyone who goes to work for a nonprofit thinks, oh, it's going to be easy. It's a nonprofit. Could not be further from the truth. They're small, underfunded
Oh,
organizations, right?
they
Well,
are hard to work from my freelance days when I would work with
yeah.
the nonprofits. It was usually it would appear disorganized, but really what it was there was just not enough people and not enough money to
Right.
bring it to like the scale that everyone's working so hard to bring it to for the
Correct.
good of people. So it was
Wildly
often
talented
like I
people.
wouldn't get an assignment for weeks, and then all of a sudden it would be like, oh yeah, here's all this stuff, and I would just get so
Yeah.
frustrated because I'd be
Yeah.
emailing and saying, can you let me know
Yeah.
about this? I gave you this.
Right.
Can you tell me edits?
Right.
Can you? Yeah,
Right. So
it's a whole world.
it is, and wildly talented people as well with big hearts and full of passion,
Yes.
which I love. But no, I needed to control my own. I needed to control my own work destiny at that point in my life, and so I got a lot of advice and coaching, and I opened up Two Rivers Partners, and it was fantastic. I loved it.
So, what advice would then you give to women who, when you're an Accenture and you were laid off, but it sounds like you had a planned date to leave anyway?
I did.
It's not every single person that let's pretend that you. Oh no, let me ask this question instead. Do you think if you had never opened Two Rivers and you were just bumping along career path, when you got laid off, do you think you would have opened up your own consultancy?
I think I absolutely would have. Absolutely. That was my plan. So I'm in what's called a portfolio career, or the portfolio stage of life. It's a great book written back in the 90s, but that is so valuable. So portfolio career, have you heard the term?
No.
It's when you stop working full time, you put together a portfolio of things to do and to make money. And there's a book on it, and it's really popular. It was really a term for retirees, but there are people who are in their by the way, Gen Z can teach all of us about portfolio careers. So it's like a portfolio, financial assets. You put your risk, you had your bets.
Mhm.
Overall, you have a good, financial situation. Same thing with a portfolio career. So I do advisory work. I lead leadership cohorts as part of a company that has this program for leadership development. I'm teaching, and I sit on nonprofit boards, and I sit on a private board. So nonprofit doesn't bring in money, but all the rest bring in some income. So my portfolio is putting all those pieces together, and right in the middle of my portfolio are my 4 F's: friends, family, fun, and fitness. And I get a chance to really focus on those things as well. So you're not tethered to one job. You are doing many different things for me, which is very fulfilling.
So then let's go back to my original question, which is what would you tell women if they're at this point where they
Yeah.
have been laid off and they're just like, I don't know what I want to do, but they have that seed in them thinking, I could start my own thing. I see
Yeah.
people starting their own thing.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I can do that.
Yeah. So look, also in my post, I wrote that getting laid off is normalized as something that one should feel shame about. So I think that, people have to make sure that they spend the time going through the emotional journey, whether you leave voluntarily and you don't want to go back into full-time work, or you get laid off. So what I would tell them is, there's a lot of different ways to start your own thing. And I know you know this yourself. I'm a fractional chief commercial officer right now for a small consultancy. You can become a fractional executive. There's a lot of work out there, and that's a thing, right? Where you come in and you join the team, and you're working part time, and you're being paid 1099,
Mhm.
but that you're delivering executive level services. Or you can start your own LLC, and also be paid on 1099, but you have a website, you have a whole portfolio of services, you're marketing your services as a business.
Mm.
But also just do your own thing with the shingle and, have an LLC and not even have a website. The colleague that I work with the most, she left Accenture with me. She has her S Corp. She doesn't want a website. She doesn't want to market. She just comes onto my projects and we get to play together. So there's so many different ways to do it. And you don't have to spend a lot of money or have a website in order to do it. You can just start doing it. And the way you do it is through your network.
Mm.
When I left Accenture, I had no idea after 34 and a half years that my network was so huge. People were just like coming out of the woodwork. And I spent the
Yeah.
first 3 months on a listening tour. And so that's really what got me going again, in terms of how I want to have this next round of Two Rivers Partners really show up and really be.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. When I started freelancing, I actually knew nobody who wanted my services. No one. So
Oh,
I had
yeah.
to start from like complete bare bones, grassroots marketing, organic marketing.
Wow.
But I think looking back, when I started my second business with coaching, I realized like your network is so huge and that network you build. And I think that like even though I had a pretty good network, no one was interested in my services because it was all different field basically. But I do tell people like your network, and when I hear people on my podcast over and over again, it's something that they always talk about. Like tap into your network, reach out to people, see, because you never know when someone knows someone, right? It
That's
might not
right.
be them directly that need your
Right.
work or know of, but they might know of someone else, right?
Absolutely. My three biggest clients, we started Two Rivers July of 23, all came through my network.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and I just found a friend of mine who is in my network, and I was to help her secure a contract as a fractional executive. So yes, 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 yes. I grew up in consulting, and when I started, sales was a dirty word. We don't sell, we're no, you know, but sales is what it's all about, and it's about relationship sales.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
sell through relationships and that personal commitment to your clients or your prospects' success. And
Mm-hmm.
then they want to work with you because you're there for them at every corner. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how one sells your services. And everyone is good at that. Everyone can do that because you do it when you're inside as well in a full-time job.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. It's so true. And I think for anyone listening, if you're actually in a corporate career, you should be taking advantage of the like group dinners that people do, the
Yeah.
happy hours that are put on, those little like company events that seem like, oh, I don't really want to do this at the end of the day, but you
Yeah.
should because you're building your network and that's going to come in use later on. Whether you go entrepreneurship or you stay in corporate, that network is going to be so big and getting it to you
Yeah.
to your next level. So
Can
I
I add?
always advise the younger generation to do
Yeah.
that.
I want to add just one thing on that. Like, I'm a raving introvert, and nobody ever believes me when I say it. I do not like networking. I walk into a room like, oh, I don't want to talk to anybody. So a lot of us feel that way. Some of us are just, oh, we're extroverts. Any party is a good day.
Yeah.
Um, it's okay to be shy and to be anxious and to not want to go. It is okay. Just know that that is what you're feeling now. Go to the event, go find someone and just say hi. And they're going to say, hi. Oh, who are you? What do you do? I'm so and so. So it's everybody wants to talk to you,
Yeah.
everybody. And
And
if
that's
they
the
don't,
point of the networking
you don't
events.
want to
I
talk
tell
to them.
people, like,
That's right.
people
Right.
are there to talk and get to know you. It's not like you're going to
Absolutely.
automatically make a sale, but it's just to
Yeah.
talk and get to know people. And it's good practice, honestly, to
Yeah.
practice your pitch and practice what you sell. Like, because you stumble and that's natural. But then
Yeah.
as you go to more and you practice more, it's just something that really you learn to refine and how to
Yeah.
say it succinctly and to make it what you do clear, right?
Right.
Which is so important. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about, the scuba diving and the
Yeah.
pictures that you took. And I read somewhere, I don't know if I have this note. Let me look. How many places have you been scuba diving? It was like a huge
Oh,
number, but I can't find it in my notes.
everywhere. I mean, I'm going to Cuba in a week and I'm so excited to scuba dive. So I'm going to tour around a little bit. I have not counted. I do have a globe back there with pins in it, of
Oh,
every
cool.
every place I've been, country, and I think there
Yeah.
are like 50 of them on there. And they weren't all scuba diving trips; some were business trips. but Caribbean is my go-to place. Grand Cayman, I go 3 times a year. Okay, let's get that out of the way. But then, I go to the Pacific, Indonesia, Thailand, Solomon Islands.
Oh,
I've been
very
to the
cool.
Galapagos, the Red Sea, and other places I'm sure I'm not remembering. But yeah, I buy around the world tickets and I fly literally around the globe, and I'll take 2 weeks out and always end up somewhere on a dive boat somewhere.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
yeah,
So you
because
you
yeah,
you're doing this scuba diving during the year. You said you try to do it at least quite a few times during the year. You've got your four F's, your friends, family, fun, and fitness. How do you manage running a business and having this personal life at the same time?
yeah, it's hard. It is really hard. But it's hard when you're working full time too. So um time management has been a challenge because I love to say yes. I love to do things. And right now I'm just got so many interesting, beautiful things coming my way. And so it's not monochromatic like it can be when you're working full time. It's like a spectrum of color, of what's available. So I'm unwinding a few things right now because I've overcommitted myself. So you also have to know when it's time to unwind a few things when you've taken on too much. But so I mentioned this person who I work with from Accenture, for example. We have a deal in the books to potentially do some work in July. I'll be in Cuba for 10 days, so I'm bringing her on because I trust her. So I can go away and know that all the work that needs to get done to get ready for the workshop on the 8th and 9th, should we be fortunate enough to win the work, will be done. So make sure you have, even if you're a freelancer, solopreneur, have trusted people who you can bring on when it's time for you to go away, because you cannot plan for that.
Mhm.
That's key. And then I just literally finished an RFP for one of my clients where I worked 3, 14, 15, 16-hour days. And it was bad. I was going to say something else, but it was bad and it was painful and I'm exhausted. And so you have to know when to recover. So when we're finished, I'm going to shut down, go get a workout in, and go to a restaurant and get myself a nice late lunch, early dinner. So, you have to make sure that you have ways just to reconnect. I texted 25 friends last night. Hey, I know I've been so quiet, but how are you? Tell me how you are. So,
Mhm.
you just have to find the ways to be human again. And, it'll suck the life out of you, just like a job will, like toxicity that I referred to. Um, you just have got to, first of all, cry if you're really, really overwhelmed. Just let it out and go scream in the pillow if you have to. But then when it's over, because everything does end, um, go and use some of the outlets that you've created to renew yourself and refresh.
And
But
how are
man,
you going to avoid, do you think, getting a client like that again in the future, or the one that had you working like 13 to 16-hour days? How are you going to avoid
yeah.
that?
Well, I did that willingly because
Oh, you did.
I love this client, and I'm so committed to their success. And I said yes, I would do it, and I knew what it would take. So I did that willingly. But I have another prospect that I had a couple of months ago, and I didn't have a good feeling about this individual person. I found that this person was a kind of a toxic leader, and whose expectations I didn't feel I could ever meet. And I found a way to say no gently, because I knew this is not what I want to have in my life. I don't feel good about, the situation. So, and I wanted the money because, you have to put together the income to live your life. But I decided it wasn't worth it, that I would be able to find some other ways, to bring in some income into my business. And I did. So you have to be able to make those hard decisions when your gut is telling you that maybe this isn't the right fit for me. And it's hard when, you don't have a steady paycheck showing up in the bank.
Mm,
But it would have taken time away from doing what I needed to do to go get other clients.
yeah.
So I made a hard decision. And I can do that where I am, but everyone can. I always believe trust the universe, because even though it's not a steady paycheck that shows up every 2 weeks, the universe will take care of you.
Hmm.
You're good
Hmm.
at what you do. You've made it, you've proven yourself, and people will want your services. You just got to put the work in to get your
Hmm.
message out.
And keep doing it, even
Keep
when
doing.
sometimes it feels like no one's
Oh, yeah,
showing up.
that's right.
I just had like this, God, I want to say like 2.5, 3 months of like no one reaching out to me. And I was like, this just happened. And then this week I had someone reach out to me. I was like, okay, it's we're still going. We're still going. But it
Yeah.
comes in waves and you need to understand. I think that's one thing being in
Yeah.
business for so long has taught me is like don't be fearful when there's a little bit
Yeah.
of a low and learn how to prepare for it.
Right.
You did mention that age 30 to 50 is these peak wealth creation years.
Yeah.
So what can you be thinking of as a woman at the younger end and also in the older end of that
Yeah.
range?
By the way, 30 to 60.
30 to 60. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
a good 30-year chunk.
30 years, like in your 20s, you're just getting going and you're just, I have a 32-year-old former colleague of mine who just made partner in 11 years. She's different. She's like 31, I think. And that's awesome. But you're really spending like, that first decade or so, getting your feet on the ground. But sometime around 30 also when many people start their families, right? And
Mm,
that's why business is being so much more friendly to mothers mostly and fathers to have time off to do what they need to do is key, and then come back and still be in the promotion stream, not losing those months
mm,
are really key because those are your peak wealth creation. So 30s are when you start to get those roles where you actually start to make some meaningful money, and they're just talking in general terms, right? And then your 40s, you're getting into senior leadership, and your 50s, your salary is increasing, your stock has, if you have stock, is accumulating a lot of equity. You've got a financial portfolio that you can work with, and so all of those years are leading toward whenever you want to stop full-time work. You could do it at 30, 20, 50, 60, 70. Whenever you want to do it, you're going to want to do something, unless you dream of playing golf and pickleball forever and every day. That's correct. Nothing wrong with that. But most people I talk to who are in my age, I'm in my early 60s, they don't want to do that. They have a lot more to give. My
mhm,
parents retired from full-time work at 68.
mhm,
So how do you take that wealth that you accumulate and have a plan for life after full-time work and making sure you're really on top of that? You don't have to know what you're going to do, but you may know that you're not going to do what you're doing today, which is going to work 5 days a week,
mm.
360, well, not 365, but
But yeah,
Monday, Friday, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's like, how do I use these wealth creation years? Not for retirement. Yes, for retirement, but yes, for retirement. And I hate that word. Reinvention, of yourself outside of a full-time job and
yeah,
being mindful about it.
yeah. And how does the portfolio career kind of play into this? Because
Yeah.
I'm keep going back to that because I find it so
Yeah.
interesting to think about like it's almost like having different branches of income, really.
100%.
And it can be anything from, I'm guessing, from my understanding, you could have real estate, you could have stocks, you could have your career, or you could be an entrepreneur with like four different businesses, right? Like that's kind of what you're saying. So how does that play into the peak wealth
Yeah.
creation?
I love it. Yeah. See, I don't build things, right? I'm a consultant. I'm a service provider. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you're building a tech company, say, for example, that's a whole, or a makeup line, that's a whole different line that I don't understand. I look at those people like, how did you do that? How do you do that? Raise the money. I don't have to raise money for my business. It's all funded through my clients. So, what the question was. Yes. Um,
How does the peak wealth, I mean, how does the portfolio
yeah,
career play
yeah,
into a
right.
peak wealth creation?
Exactly. So I knew that I wanted to teach. So I taught my first class at Columbia University Teachers College this spring, and I loved it. And now I have an opportunity potentially to teach at NYU. So I knew I wanted to do that. So I got all over, getting introduced, et cetera. That is not, you're not going to get rich off of that. I built two rivers, and I knew I wanted to invest in a website. I wanted
Mm,
to invest in my brand. I hired people to coach me on my LinkedIn profile. I hired a writer to help me write some articles. I hired someone to help me get speaking engagements. And so I actually hired people to help me build the brand and get my name out there. I got some certifications. I got certified in board service because I'm getting paid board seats as part of my portfolio. So I have gotten several certifications and I invested in that. So figuring out how I was going to use my money to invest in not Barbara, but my business, right? I had the money to spend on going to conferences, hiring people, getting certifications. That's what I mean when I say 30 to 60. Start thinking about what are you going to have to spend money on, whether it's building a website or whatever. and having that money and not feeling guilty about it,
Mm.
because you have to spend the money. I know you know this as an entrepreneur, freelancer, you have to spend money to make money. And I was ready for that
I mean, I
I
resisted that for years. God, like I
yeah,
paid the
right.
bare minimum. I was like
Yeah.
professional email and I had a very bare bones website, but enough that like I could direct
Yeah.
people to it. That's all I
Yeah.
had for a long and internet security, but that was all I had for a
Yeah.
long time. Bare
Yeah.
basics. And then I realized that I had plateaued. I couldn't do
Yeah.
anything
Can't
more
scale.
unless I hired or I got my own coach and I learned how to like, scale up. But yeah, it's you do have to spend that money to make that money
Yeah. And
if
there's
you
a
want
lot
to
of things to spend your money on too. So spend it
grow. Oh, yeah.
wisely. Like I spent some money last year. Like didn't really ROI, but
What was it? Can you share? Because that's
I joined a
something
couple
we're
women's
interested in.
groups that were really good. One of them, it changed and it no longer had women at my point in my life. They were younger. And I felt like I can get a lot from them, but I need help from people who are going through what I'm going through. And it just wasn't the right fit for me.
Mm.
Um, I hired some virtual assistants in the Philippines, and they're wonderful. In fact, and my Accenture EA was from the Philippines, and she worked for me, and she was great. Then she had to go off and get a full-time job, so I did tried that. That was not good. Um, yeah. So I guess just some things like that where it just didn't really work out. Uh, yeah. So
Yeah.
you have to be wise about it and know when but know when you don't need it anymore. Like I'm sailing now, and I need something maybe different now. And judging and evaluating where I'm going to put my budget is going to change every 6 months to every year.
Yeah. And I think I'm going through that now with one aspect of my business where I had this realization that's no longer working for my business. And
Yeah.
what do I need to do to change that? Like what needs to happen and where does my budget fall? And it was
Yeah.
hard though, because you hold
Yeah.
on to things. You
You
really do.
do. You
Yeah.
do. You do. And unwinding from relationships that you've had, like a financial advisor, a coach, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it just says, yeah, I'm in that phase where I'm having to have some tough talk. And I don't like to have tough. I'm good. I can do it. Gosh, I can do it. I've done it. I don't like it though. But I'm sorry to have some difficult conversations
Yeah.
because I got to only get in my sphere what is working.
Yes. I had a podcast guest. I love talking about this, but she changed my life when she said everything has to work in the ecosystem of my business.
I love that.
It's an ecosystem and there are different parts, but they all have to work and meld together to be bringing me revenue.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. And that just stuck with me. And I come back to it. For those who want to listen to it, it's Monica Bay. We'll put that in the show notes. But she just was talking about that ecosystem and like everything's got to talk. And she was making she was building something out. What was it? I want to say it was like almost like a playlist Spotify kind of thing, music thing. I don't even remember,
Wow.
a radio or something. And she
Wow.
was just like, I put my heart and soul and I put so much money into it. And then one day I was just like, this is not going to speak into my ecosystem. So I have to stop it before it gets too far. And I think about that all the time with my own business. Like what is speaking into my
Yeah.
my ecosystem? What is making sense? And
Yeah.
that has to stay and go in there. Everything has to direct to like how is it bringing me revenue? Even if it's not direct revenue, it has to somehow
I love
speak.
it. You're getting so I felt like when I was working full time, my intuition was turned off more than
Mm,
it should have been. And now that I'm on my own, my intuition is just speaking to me, and I'm much more trusting of the universe. It sounds so woo woo, but I do believe that there's something that out there that's you're gonna know, you're gonna
yeah.
and listening, learning how to listen to that is so key.
And why do you think it was turned off when you were working full time? Is it because other people were like you were part of the ecosystem feeding into a larger thing? Do you think it was because it was just nonstop go, go, go and you didn't have time? Why
A
do you
little bit
think
of
that was
that.
kind of
There's a lot of enablement, that goes on. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of structure and rigor around what success is and how you define it and how you are successful. And you fall sort of a little bit into the train track mentality of going up and getting a promotion, getting a raise, getting a this, getting a that. And the how to be successful, I mastered that. I knew exactly how to be successful in those kinds of companies. Wasn't always successful. I wasn't always, I would behave in ways as like, oh, why do you do that? But it was just more, I guess, programmed. And so, kind of going along with the game. And I had intuition, of course, but it was a little more singularly focused on that corporation and what I was doing inside that corporation instead of the bigger, broader I love the word ecosystem, the
Yeah.
ecosystem, that is a human life,
Mm.
you
Mm.
know.
And I think you do have to really hone that as a business owner, and you learn from
Yeah.
experience when you got to trust that gut and that intuition and know what the right next steps are.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about hiring because you have so much experience. You said you had a team of like 250 members or something at one
Yeah.
point.
Yes.
So you have hired in business, in your career with the corporate world. Can you give us some advice for women who are hiring and seem to be making mistakes or having challenges? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing worse than a bad hiring decision, right? It's bad for the person, it's bad for the hiring manager, hiring leader. Um, you know, uh, I recruited often from my alma mater, Columbia University Teachers College, because I just know what kind of people they produce. So I would just go there, not through a formal campus recruiting program, but I would just go there and see who's there and what's going on. I got good people that way. Um, you know, you got to build a solid relationship with your recruiter, your recruiting team, internal recruiting team. Treat them with great respect. I mean, I feel like recruiters feel like a factory. you
Mm.
know Executives and business leaders, hiring managers, they always like to complain, about the recruiters. And so, they are your pipeline. And so really partnering with that part of the business is so key. Then, being really clear about what a good screen candidate looks like with your recruiters, because they don't know your business. So you got to spend the time with them and say, so these are all the upfront stuff, right? Like, I only want screen candidates that really check these boxes and look like that. So I know I'm getting good people. Um, then, I heard a speaker one time said that you're never as good as your first day. And it's true, right? Your first interview, your first day. And how do you get, underneath to really know what somebody can really do? And it's just some basic methods, around if they say, we, well, what did you do? You got to get underneath about 3 different levels. So I don't want a broad, I read your resume. Don't give me the broad. Let's stick to one example of something that you accomplished. Now let's drill into it. What was your role? What did you do? Tell me a problem that you face. So it's that kind of interviewing technique that I think is super valuable. And gut, is this someone you want to work with? And also bias, really making sure your biases aren't creeping in. Because some people are very introverted and they don't interview well. They may be neurodiverse, but really brilliant, and they don't interview well. Um, they may have a hidden disability you don't know about, and it's somehow showing up. It doesn't look like, what you expect to walk in the door, So
Mm.
you have to really be in tune with your biases, because if you are, you're going to hire somebody because of their talents. So it's also like, look at their skills and talents. Don't look at their resume. If they had a break in service, find out why.
Mm.
What was it that caused it? And maybe there was a real human story in there, that this is a really resilient person. They left work for 3 years because something happened in their life, and that's a resilient person. So I was like, look closer. What's behind this person's stories, and get to know them as a human being.
Mm.
To me, I don't think they've come to my desk. I'm talking about, like, they haven't not come across my desk unless they've met all the technical check boxes. My
Mm.
job is to get underneath whether or not they've got the resilience, they've got, the stamina, they'll fit in the culture, they've got the lived experience that's going to make them a superstar performer.
Mm.
I
Well,
don't
good
know.
advice.
Yeah.
Can you lay out for us the steps you used to grow your business the first time you launched, this
Yeah.
second time, and then did it change at all?
Yeah. Well, I was lucky. I had a younger brother who has a very successful portfolio business. He's an actor, speaker, writer. He does communications consulting and presentation skills workshops. So
Wow.
yeah, he's amazing. Rob Biesenbach. He's my younger brother is a rock star. And I took my notebook. I flew to Evanston and I spent the weekend with him and his family of small children. And I said, "What do I have to do?" And I still have the notebook. So when I relaunched, I pulled out that notebook. He gave me all the steps. Build a. He goes, "Barb." My family calls me Barb. I don't like being called Barb in business, but he goes, "Barb, um, uh, don't build a business plan. Just write down on one piece of paper who's your market, who are you selling to, what are your services, who do you know, what do you, and then I'm going to now tell you what you need." So he coached me on a very simple business plan. And then, build a website. Here's how you ought to go about doing that. Don't get too fancy. Don't spend too much money on the first iteration because it's going to change.
Mm.
You know, set up an LLC. Here's how you do it. Get QuickBooks or some sort of financial software. Hire a bookkeeper, have them help you make sense of that. Make sure your accountant knows that you're going to be on 1099. They're going to do quarterly taxes. Like, he went down to the nth degree of all the financial things that I had no clue about. And then, LinkedIn wasn't as big of a thing in 2015, but he goes, "How are you going to build your brand? Who are you? How are you going to tell your story? Are you going to write? Are you going to, are you going to blog? What are you going to do? Should you do video?" So he told me all of the things that I needed to do. And then call everybody, send your link to them, write them an email, and boom, I got this 50% time with this nonprofit. And then I have 3 other clients who are former clients of mine. I called them up and I say, "I'm on my own. When you need something, we did great work together." So he just laid out, step by step by step, all the things I had to make sure I had. Get some business card,
Mm.
get some back then we had, get some stationery. Even in 2015, I still have that stationery. It's like, why do I have all this stationery? But yeah, get your business cards. What conferences do you want to go to? Go to those conferences, and then try to build a speaker portfolio. I started doing that, and then I went to Accenture, and because it's such a big place, I didn't really get a lot of speaking. I got some speaking engagements and chances to author, but not a lot because there weren't that many slots. So my brand died a little bit, and so I've been focusing on rebuilding my speaking circuit, which is important. So, but you get out there, have a voice, and talk about the topics that you can add value around.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just a pretty obvious checklist, but having somebody who's done it before me lay it out and have it in a notebook where I wrote it all down, that was so essential for me, is just to have him give me the steps.
And then the second time around, did you change anything, or was it you just went back to the notebook and you're like, "I'm just going to follow these steps"?
I went back to the notebook. I had my LLC already. It was on ice. I had to pay $9 to restart it, and rebuilt my website. What's interesting about this time around, it has come to me. I didn't set out to do this, but all my clients are nonprofits except for one. The other one that's not a nonprofit is a small growing business. And I realized I want to marry mission and money. That is my mantra right now that I'm living by. I want to marry mission and money. I want to do purpose-led work. If one of my former clients, one of the big major, super majors in the oil and gas business, called me for a job, heck yeah, I do it. But I'm not looking for it because I'm finding such great satisfaction. So what's different now is I kind of have a little bit of a focus, which is around bringing my Accenture level skill and capability to companies that can't afford those rates, but
Mm.
need that talent. So I have a rate that is definitely not anywhere near my Accenture rate, but I don't care. It's enough to fuel and to sustain me. And I want to be able to help these businesses grow.
Mm.
So
I like
I've
that.
changed my relationship with, having to make all the money in the world because I did a good job, preparing for this stage of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you said about when in like, starting your business, growing it, you have to build your brand. And the way you said it, how are you going to tell your story? Because that's so important when you're building your personal brand. And I love that like thought process that went into it. Is it video? What are advantages of videos? Is it a blog? What are the advantages of that? What is it going to be like LinkedIn? Is it going to be Instagram? Like there's so many ways you could go into that. And I thought that was really fascinating. How are you going to tell your story?
Yeah.
because that's like the medium of how you're going to do that is going to attract certain people. So what did you end up with building your brand? What did you end up deciding on? How do you tell your story? Where are you most active for
So
marketing?
I leaned into to LinkedIn. I do a fair bit of podcasts, which has been the kind of thing that builds on
Mm,
itself.
it
I
does.
also I publish a newsletter on LinkedIn. I'm a little delinquent in keeping up with that, but so on LinkedIn, I want to write about the future of work. I want to write about board governance, and I want to write about human capital, and I want to wrap around all of that authenticity, realness. I'm a mental health and disability advocate. I'm a chair of a global board that trains youth to lead around a lot of issues, whether it be climate, sexual health, gender equity, etc. So I also want to wrap around that the issues that the intersection of the things I just mentioned are the issues that I care about. So when I think about board governance, there's a big thing right now around whether boards should pull back on speaking out like they did when Me Too happened or when George Floyd was murdered. They were out there talking, and now they're, there's a big backlash toward taking a stance because you can't win. You
Yeah.
will upset somebody. You will.
That's exactly my thought. What through my head was, you can't
Yeah,
win. So it's
you
like
cannot
so
win.
hard either
But
way. If you make the choice to go out there
right,
with, like, I
right.
mean, look at what happened to Bud Light. I feel like
Yes,
that is a
right,
reason why so many people are pulling back now because they're like, I don't want that to happen to me. Like,
right
I don't want
on.
that to happen to my big brand. But
That's
like
right.
Bud Light took a chance, and I respect them for that. I never liked their beer. I'm not drinking it still. I'm not going out supporting them. But
But no, but you know what though? They lost a lot of profit, so they pulled back.
yeah. Oh
And,
yeah.
and Dylan Mulvaney was quoted saying, "It's almost worse that they had a trans person promote their product. It would almost be worse if they never had a trans person promote their product than what they did in pulling back. That hurts more, the
Mm.
pullback.
What
And
did they do for the pullback? See, I don't think I followed it
oh, they
like
said,
to
"Oh,
that extent.
we are going to only stick to beer and sports." Like,
Oh, okay.
right, we're not going to talk about any of that stuff anymore. And then people started buying the beer again. I get it. I'm a
I know.
capitalist. I get it. However, for the trans community, it really hurt. Really, really hurt. Israel, Gaza, we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to go there, but that is a very sticky wicket for companies right now,
Yep.
for
Yep.
everybody, frankly, for society as a
And so
whole.
people just don't say anything. And then when you
Yeah.
don't say
So,
anything, it turns into it's so tricky nowadays with the internet because things travel
yeah,
so fast and all it takes is
yeah,
one person's comment to become wildfire and everyone just starts
yeah,
latching onto it. I think about this all the time because I'm very active on LinkedIn too. And sometimes
yeah. You
can't
see,
remember what the post was about, but someone wrote a post. I think she was my competitor, but she took a hard stance on something
yeah,
that I didn't disagree with, but I didn't feel strongly about. And I wrote this whole comment out that was very, I thought, straightforward and not detrimental. But then I
yeah,
thought, but what if someone does take this the wrong way? And then
yeah,
they're going to question me. And then what if that looks bad on me? And like, is it bad? I don't know. I can't. So I just deleted it. And I was like, that's hard too, because you're in a place
yeah,
where you want to feel like what you say can be respected. And like I was just talking about
yeah,
something in business, not even trans
yeah,
community, not even a political thing. And it was like a business stance. And I was like,
yeah.
I feel like it's so
People
difficult
can't have dialogue now. Yeah, I use Facebook for my more provocative things. I use LinkedIn as much more professionally. However, I do believe in humanizing the LinkedIn world. You got to, it's a self promotion platform. There's nothing wrong with, by the way, self promotion. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to do it a little bit with grace and style,
Mm,
right? And you also have to give back, and promote others.
mm,
But I do kind of try to keep it business, but I also try to keep it very human.
yeah. I think
So
we're seeing a shift towards, and I've talked about this with other podcast guests. I think we're seeing a shift towards social media becoming more human again, not just LinkedIn, because
yeah.
Instagram was like the worst. I mean, they
Oh,
like everyone like made themselves out to be the greatest highlight reels. Like it was the worst. And there's definitely a shift as Gen Z comes more into play, being like, this is not real. Like this is not
Yeah.
like let's have more of the realness coming back into authenticity. But now I see people like going off the deep end and just sharing everything and crying on social media. And I'm
I
like,
know, I know, I know, I know,
is
I know.
there a balance here
Yeah, I
where
know.
we can be
Are
authentic
there any
without crying?
boundaries? Yeah. No, I
Um, anyway, yeah, I know we got off
we
on a tangent
digress, but
there.
essentially just
Uh, what hurdles have you specifically faced in your business growing and running it as a woman?
yeah. You know, last time, a Two Rivers Partners version one, I worked with, sort of a financial services client, and it was me and a bunch of guys. Now, listen, I'm very used to being the only woman on the leadership team. That was most of my career. But I didn't feel respected, and I didn't feel valued. I felt like my talents were not being used. And there's nothing worse in business or work when your talents aren't being used. And so it felt like sexism directed at me. Um, it's hard to put your finger on that. And you don't want to go there because we're all strong, powerful women. And we're not victims. We are powerful in our own right, but sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you feel it not listened to because of your gender. And so I tried to unwind myself from that client as fast as I could. It's like, this is toxic. I'm not going to do it. So I don't feel any of that in my selling, in my positioning of my work. I don't. But this particular situation, it was just the client culture. And I knew it wasn't a culture that I wanted to work in. So I don't know why I didn't see it before. And maybe I was desperate not desperate, but I really wanted to win the work.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to sign a new contract. It feels great. But I don't know how you turn around a situation like that because you're not there to change their culture. They didn't hire you to change their culture. You're in their culture. And so I think it's just important to just be really aware of the kind of, we get to choose who we work with. And you need to be very true to your values and principles around who you want to work with. And don't get yourself into that kind of situation because it was very painful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you nailed it on the head when you said it was hard to pinpoint. And there's always those situations where you're like, there's no outright evidence, but I know what's happening here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's always the hardest one because bringing it to anyone's attention is going to be like, what?
Yeah. What's wrong
What are
with
you talking about? And then you feel even worse because
She's
you
one
feel
of
like they're
those.
demeaning you and like condescending. And you're like, but I know, because my gut and my intuition is telling me you
Yeah.
guys are not respecting me because of my gender. So I feel that. I know. And that's hard for any woman to be in
I
that
know
position.
you're not there to change that issue. That's not your thing. So figure out a way to get out of it or to tolerate. I have a friend who has a similar situation right now and they pay her quite well. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Why don't you just take the money for as long as you can and not invest so much emotional
Mm,
capital? Do your work, do your job, but take out the emotional capital that you're putting into it and go find something else. And
mm.
but take the money till you can find something else.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because I put a lot of emotion into my work and my career. I always
Yeah,
have.
it's hard to do. It's so hard to do. So that's not the answer. That's not a long-term answer unless you want to
No,
get burned out, and killed by the toxicity. No one wants that.
no. So, what advice do you have for other women as they're trying to grow their own business?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Listen, I'm a big believer. I'm not good at I use Headspace to meditate and they have this thing called noting. Like if you're having bad thoughts, you just note it. That's just me having a bad thought. I don't. I just let them flow all day long. But it's like when you're on your own, there are days, as you said, when there's no incoming. There's no calls, there's no incoming. You got to do the thing that no one likes to do, which is go do demand generation. So it's like when you're feeling, when I'm ever feeling like, oh, I don't feel like working. I don't want to do it. Just do one thing. Can you do calls for 20 minutes? Can you write 3 emails that day? Can you write one email message to someone that you used to work with and say, hey, I have some opening in my time. And, let me know when you have something. Just once, just twice, put in your calendar. So to me, that's the best advice because it would be very easy to get depressed or anxious or lazy or procrastinate. And it's okay to be all those things. Those feelings are normal and normal, but just try to take 1, 2, 3, 4 actions each day to do one thing toward that, getting out of that. Why isn't my phone ringing? Why I'm not going to have money. I'm going to starve. I'm going to whatever happens inside the head. So to me, like that is the most important thing.
Mm.
And then, I'm also, seeking additional board seats. And so I'm part of these different opportunities to get land board seats. And I was talking to someone, she goes, you're the third woman I've heard sell herself short in terms of her readiness to be on a board. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that because I don't believe it. But why am I telling you all this in this way? So even if you feel like you're not qualified, you don't say it out loud unless you're in a coaching situation and you're working with your coach.
Right.
Say it with confidence, even if you don't believe it. Because I think that's another thing that we tend to do as business owners. Practice that message and make sure you're always on that message. Yeah.
I actually had a podcast guest once who she would go on a bunch of podcasts when she had a new offer because she was trying to perfect it and trying to tell. So she would get confident in saying it.
Yeah.
I thought it was like fascinating because she was like, I would look for actually the podcasts that didn't have a lot of episodes that I like, they were just starting out and they really wanted guests so that I knew that there weren't tons of people listening, but I would build confidence in saying what I wanted to say so that once I actually was approached by a client or prospective client, I knew exactly how I was going to say it easily. And I was like, oh, fascinating.
That is a low risk laboratory.
But I thought it was a great idea. And she was like, that is why I would go out on podcasts just to practice my offer. And I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah. Cause there is like a certain level of like heightened suspense when you're on a podcast. You're still talking to someone else. There's still that report. You're still trying to figure out how to say what you want to say exactly. It's just a good, like you said, low risk, good way to practice before you actually have to be in front of people that you need to convince.
Yeah. Like I'm not an optimist. I'm a pessimist. I tend to see the glass is half empty. I do. I'm just admitting who I am. And it's hard to be an entrepreneur when that's your come from place. I work on that a lot. And so I have ways of getting myself out of that spiral of despair, which is going to work out, going out, taking a walk, getting lunch, sending one email, just one. And then also just wallowing in it sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know what I am. Like if I'm a pessimist or optimist, I think on the surface I would be an optimist, but I definitely wallow for 2 or 3 days when something big doesn't go right. Like if I'm launching something and I don't get as many sales as I wanted, I will totally get down on myself. And then I let myself do that. And then I figure out, like you said, that action step. What do I need to do to try to make sure this doesn't happen again next time and work towards that?
Right.
All right. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Barbara. Please tell us, where can we find you if a woman's trying to connect with you and they want to learn more about you, or someone even wants your services or knows about like someone who would need like what you offer? Where can they find you? We'll put it in the show notes.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, of course, my LinkedIn, I'm very active. So Barbara Spitzer. And then my website is Two Rivers Partners. Two is spelled TWO, Rivers Partners. And you can go there and find out why I named it that. And that's where you can find my business.
Awesome. Thank you. What is one philosophy, mantra, or quote you try to run your business by?
Well, like I say, I'm about marrying mission and money. So I want to work for mission. Even if it's a for-profit company, it's doing something good.
Doing something good. Great. Love it. And for our audience, we've really learned so much from Barbara today. We've learned a lot about going by your gut, following your intuition. We talked about building your brand and how are you going to tell your story and the different avenues to do that. And we talked a lot about networking and how using your network is so essential for scaling your business. So Barbara, thank you again for joining me on this interview. And if you're part of our audience and you found this informative, do us a favor, me and Barbara, share it with someone else who might really find this interesting. And then that will help us grow the show. So for now, you can find me on LinkedIn, Kiri Mohan. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you.